That should be doing fine. Cool. How did you? Hello? You just fart? Whatever. How did you get so messed up? You're not even like my normal one, because you're just like the communal one. I guess that makes sense. You're the communal one. Alright. Let's take this. That there. Yeah, let's put that there. We'll put that there. We'll put this here. I hear a dog. I hear a dog. And there she went. Okay. If you'll excuse me. No? Okay. That's fine. Oh. I'm kind of red. Yeah, that's fine. All right. So, if you have noticed the title of the video, we're going to be talking about the Player's Handbook today, because this is, you know, the quintessential book. If you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, you kind of have to have this book. If you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, it's not an if, it's not a maybe, you kind of have to have it. And it's very good. It's very well written. It's very detailed in that it gives you a lot of options. It tells you the rules very clearly, which is good. In general, I would say that it is just, it's a solid book, which is really good by itself. It's very good. The thing about it, though, is that it is a little over 300 pages long of pretty dense rules. There's a lot of information in here, and there's a lot that can be easily missed. It happens. It happens all the time, every single time. Like, I miss it sometimes. Like, there are some things on this list that I didn't know was a thing until very recently. And I've been playing for, like, 5th edition for almost what feels like 1,000 years, like 5 years. A long time. So with that, this video is here to talk to you about things that you may have missed going through this, because it's easy to glance over a lot in this book because it is so big, and a lot of the more important stuff, or like the more like the flashier stuff, is stuff like the races and the classes, weapons, spells. Obviously, the spell section of this book is great. It's a fun read. It's very exciting, but there is a lot of information here, and the stuff you can learn from this will make your games better. It'll make them a lot smoother. It will add to role-playing. It will add to combat. It will do all these great things. So let's talk about the 7 things that you probably missed in the Player's Handbook. Again, it's not a judgment. I'm not here to judge you. It's more of, it's really easy to go over to glance over these things, and I want to take a bit of time to talk to you and let you know that there are a lot of cool, fun little rules here that are good to know. The first one, and these aren't in a particular order except for kind of the last one, which I think is very important, but the rest aren't really in order. So the first one is kind of the first thing you see in the book. The first major chapter in this book is about the races in Dungeons and Dragons. And everyone knows the races: dwarves, elves, half-elves, dragonborn, tiefling, humans, halflings, gnomes, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And people usually pick the races first, and it is a good thing to pick first. It helps improve your stats, and picking a race usually helps you guide your way into what class you want your character to be in. That being said, you can obviously do class first and pick your race, whatever. Like it's not hard and set in stone. But if you do make a character and you're going over the races, pay a little extra detail to the bonuses that individual races grant, because more often than not, people will just put down the race. You pick an elf, and elves get a +2 bonus to dexterity, I believe. I think also to wisdom, and they have dark vision, and that's usually about the long and short of it. But there's a lot of little things that each race has in terms of a bonus that can be very, very useful. And I've noticed a lot of players kind of overlook them. And as a DM, I try to remind them, like, oh, remember, you have this racial trait. You should use it. So let's look at elves, like I was talking about. So elves, people go like, okay, your dexterity score increases by 2. They do that. Your speed, your size, dark vision. Fey ancestry is a racial bonus that some people tend to miss. And it pretty much means you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and you cannot be put to sleep. You just magically cannot be put to sleep. And that can be very, very useful if you are fighting a magic user, or like a incubus, a succubus, whose their whole thing is charming you. Vampires can charm you. And because of your race as an elf, you get to have advantage against that, which is good. Dwarves, I think miss this a lot because people think of dwarves as not the brightest. Dwarves as, kind of a burly, physical race that just kind of hits things with sticks, and that's about it. But no, dwarves are very wise and very resilient, and they can be very, very smart. The only thing is that dwarves are smart in relatively narrow things, but that doesn't discount them. Like the trait that I see people miss all the time, especially when they're playing dwarves, is stone cutting. So because of the history of dwarves as mountain folk and living pieces of the earth and things like that, you have proficiency in history checks regarding, what was it? Related to the origin of stonework in your proficiencies, and you add double the proficiency to your bonus. So even at level 1, when you have your proficiency bonus is +2, if you are a dwarf and you are checking, you're at like a temple or whatever, and you're looking at the walls, and you say, I want to look at the walls and see if the designs on the walls mean anything. Your DM could say, okay, make a history check. And because you have stone cutting as a dwarf, you add +4 to that because it's double your proficiency bonus. It's really, really good. And just keep that in mind with every race. Like when you're designing a character, just kind of sit down and look at each race and go through them because they can be very important. Dragonborns, you have a breath weapon. Like red dragonborns can breathe fire. White ones can breathe ice. More often than not, I see players forget this in combat because they're very focused on casting spells, swinging their sword, or whatever. Do keep in mind that Dragonborn can breathe fire. It's very important. Gnomes. One of the subclasses of gnomes is the forest gnome, and they have something called Natural Illusionist, which you can just cast Minor Illusion as a cantrip for free. And that's enough. rock gnomes, you can just make little toys and tinkers, and you can make a fire starter, like a lighter. Hi, buddy. That's my puppy. And your little puppy. Good night, buddy. Good night. So, hey, when you're choosing a race for your character, take a little bit of extra time, look at all the little bonuses that you get, and write them down. Write them down in a way that you can very easily identify them and refer to them, because they can be incredibly useful. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Number 2 is silvered weapons. Okay, so in the player's handbook, there is a section about weaponry. And even as you start off building a character, you get to pick what kind of weapons you have. Most often they pick a sword or daggers, things like that, a bow. What some people don't realize, or they don't notice, is that there's an option for something called silvered weapons, which are weapons that are usually dipped in like molten silver. And any weapon, any bladed weapon can do this. I think any weapon, just period. Like you can technically have like a silver hammer if you really wanted to. You can have a silver pick. You can have a silver trident. Silver trident sounds bomb. But why would you want this? Well, one, why would you want it? Because it's important. Because there are certain monsters that can only be fully damaged by silver weapons. Otherwise, they either take half or sometimes even no damage from melee attacks or physical damage, as it were. Bludgeoning, slashing, piercing. If your weapon is not silver, the enemy doesn't really take that much damage. The easy one is werewolves, lycanthropes, werebears, wereboars, wererats, all that. They are resistant to non-silvered weapons, and it can really save time. It can very much save time and efficiency. If you just keep, even it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to dip your, two-handed great sword in silver, because one, that would probably be crazy expensive to do, and it'd be a little strange. But in general, like maybe just keep a silvered weapon on hand, usually like a short sword or a dagger, something that you can use in a pinch, and you don't worry about really losing or breaking it from constant use. So silvered weapons, good to have on hand. And just on that general subject, as a tip for players who do physical damage, keep more than one type of weapon on hand. More often than not, like you see like the fighter who has a great sword and a great axe and like a hand axe, like a great sword and a hand axe. And that's all he has is weaponry. But turns out they both do slashing damage. And there are some enemies that are resistant to slashing damage or piercing damage. Like it's always the ranger. It's always the ranger or the rogue that will only have a crossbow, a bow, or a dagger. And those all do piercing damage, which if you're fighting a skeleton, piercing damage doesn't do too much. So, you don't have to carry it on hand, but just keep in mind that you want to keep your weapon diversity, diverse. Obviously, your weapon load diverse. Should you carry one of every weapon all the time? No, because it'd be too heavy for one and it'd be stupid for the other. But you do want to just have, more often than not, like the easiest thing is like a short sword, a dagger, and like a stick, like a big stick, a club, a mace, whatever. Like almost every character can fit that in. Even spellcasters, mind you, even spellcasters keep like a dagger and like a large stick on hand. Like that's why, quarterstaffs exist, and the wizard bashes something with a quarterstaff. Keep it in mind. You never know when you'll need it. But yeah, that's weapons, and silvered weapons in particular. If you have a chance in game to buy one or make one, do it. All right, number 3. Get some more drink. Okay, number 3 is one that's a little more specific, but nonetheless important. And this is for spellcasters out there, and not all spellcasters, but most of them. Clerics, druids, certain Pact of the Tome warlocks, and I think wizards. Okay, so not sorcerers. If you're not a sorcerer or like a monk or whatever, pay attention to rituals. Certain spells in the handbook, certain spells that you can cast will have this tag called ritual. And what does that mean? What does it mean to have a ritual tag? It means that on top of how it's normally cast, let me see if I can find just like a ritual spell. Wow, this is going to be exciting. I'm just looking for a thing. I'm just going to be here a while. Okay, what do I know is a ritual? Teleportation. Like teleportation circle is a ritual, or one kind of stomachos. What does this say? Or commune? Commune is a ritual, I think. Yeah, okay. So certain spells like commune, which is the things that it's a divination. Clerics have it, they can talk to their god, which is important. It'll say what level the spell is, and then parentheses ritual. So what does ritual mean? So normally the commune spell has a casting time of 1 minute. So it takes 1 minute to cast this spell. You just don't do it in combat. But doing so will take a spell slot. It will take and all that. But if you cast it as a ritual, you add 10 minutes of casting time to whatever the original casting time was. So commune is, the original casting time is a minute. If you cast it as a ritual, it takes 11 minutes to cast. But, and this is the important thing, if you cast a spell as a ritual, it does not take a spell slot. And that's super, super important. It's really important to take that in mind. If you cast a ritual spell as a ritual, it does not expend the spell slot. Why is this important? Well, it obviously doesn't work in combat because you can't add 10 minutes to a spell in combat and expect to cast it, because that's 100 turns. It's a long time. It's a long time. Or 100 rounds? No, it ain't gonna happen. But if you cast a spell as a ritual, it doesn't use a spell slot, and you could use that spell slot for another time. When is this important? It's good to know that you can do this if you are in a place that you cannot really rest very easily. What do I mean by that? The places you can't rest, like a dungeon. If you are running a dungeon, odds are pretty solid that you don't have time to just sleep and regain your spell slots. It's possible, but it's not likely. So you want to be able to maximize the amount of spells you can cast without expending all of your spell slots and being useless. So, or not as useful. You're never useless. Even if you're out of spells, you're never useless. So keep in mind, if you're a spellcaster, that if you can cast your spells or ritual, do it. Even if you're not in that scenario, even if you're just traveling through the woods and you have time to sleep, if you have the extra 10 minutes, cast your ritual spells as rituals so they don't use spell slots, because you can use them later. Like, let's go back to Commune. Commune, I believe, is a 5th level spell. Like, it's a big deal. Yeah, it's a 5th level spell. 5th level spells are not to be trifled with, just in general. Like, what could you do in lieu of that? Like, let's say you spent the 10 minutes or 11 minutes casting Commune, and you didn't use your 5th level spell slot. What can you do instead? Mass Cure Wounds. That's pretty important. Dispel Evil and Good. Pretty important. Greater Restoration. Greater Restoration is one of those things you need to always have on hand, because you never know. Because once you have that spell, the DM will start screwing with you. The DM will provide more opportunities for you to cast that spell, which is not a good thing. Greater Restoration is like if you are turned to stone, that's what Greater Restoration does. So if you have the ability to cast spells as rituals and keep that spell slot open, absolutely do it. Greater Restoration. Yeah, Greater Restoration is not a ritual. You can't do it. There actually aren't that many rituals, period. So when you're picking spells out, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that you can cast them as rituals, and that will save you in the long run. If you are running a dungeon, if you are being chased, well, not chased, it doesn't work. If you are actively doing something that you can't rest for, like you're seeking after someone, you are chasing someone, something like that, you need to be alert. Be willing to cast spells as rituals. Keep that in mind. That rituals are very important. All right, let's see. Next up. We're going back to weaponry, or at least items, because this is also important. Fizzy water time. Okay. Number 4 of things that you may have missed are tools. So what are tools? So in the section of items and equipment in the player's handbook, there's a section called tools. And tools are a series of items or kits or supplies that players can have that will increase their ability or proficiency of doing specific tasks. So when you are building a character, in the class section, when you're looking at a class, it has a section called tools, and your class will determine what tools you are proficient in. So what kind of tools are there? Well, the ones that people think of the most often are like rogues. Rogues have thieves tools, and thieves tools can be used to what is actually in a thieves tools bit? It has a lockpick and a file, which is good. You can escape things. It has a set of scissors and a pair of pliers, a small mirror mounted on a metal handle. That's actually super important. Again, I literally just learned something right now. I didn't know that a thieves tools had a tiny pole-mounted mirror. That's really important to know. So yeah, when your class tells you what skills or what tools you're proficient in, keep that in mind, because when you make a check using those tools, again, like the easiest example is the rogue. If the rogue uses their thieves tools to pick a lock, then you roll it's normally like a general check, like a dexterity check, but you get to add your proficiency to it. So if you're like a 6th level rogue, then you try to pick a lock, you make a dexterity check, and you add your proficiency to it, which is +3. So that's normally like a +7 or something ridiculous like that, and you probably succeed. So keep that in mind. And there are more than just like tools. There are kits, there are supplies. Like clerics will have an herbalism kit, and an herbalism kit will allow you to do things like make antitoxins or make healing potions. Keep that in mind. You have a kit that lets you make healing potions. Clerics, druids too, I think. Bards know about tools because instruments count as tools. And if you are making a check with a tool, like a lute or a horn or a whatever, then you add your proficiency to it, which is good. Keep that in mind. But beyond that, there's also what are called artisans' tools. And artisans' tools are more specific, narrow, and are better for role-playing purposes. So artisans' tools are things like pottery tools, mason's tools, glass blowing, cobbler tools, calligraphy supplies, brewer supplies. You can make beer. Alchemist supplies. Alchemist supplies are very good. And they're related to a specific craft, but you can still add your proficiency to make checks with that. If you are, let's say let's say you're a wizard and you have an alchemist supply bag. You can make a alchemist fire potion, which is just napalm. You can make a Molotov cocktail. Like, you can do it with these tools. So when you're building a character and you have the option to have proficiency in a tool, really pay attention to it. Like, pay attention to what's in it, keep it in mind, and again, write these down. All of these things, write them down in a clear and easy to refer to way, because you should be able to do that. And that'll probably be the next video, along with a few others, which is how to streamline your character sheet. Words. How to streamline your character sheet. But that's for another day. So tools. Keep them in mind. Don't sleep on tools. Don't sleep on them. They're important. Okay. Moving on. I think we're moving to actions. Yes, actions and combat. This is important. Okay, so number 5. Okay, number 5. I think the next 3 are mostly, they're kind of higher up. Again, it's not super tiered in terms of a list. But these are important because these are ones that you can use in real time, like in combat and things like that. Keep it in mind. So number 5 is grappling and shoving. Now, people tend to know what grappling is. You do it in combat. You can do it out of combat. You can just grab someone and you make an athletics check. They make an athletics check. If yours is higher, you succeed, and you hold them, you pin them down, whatever. It doesn't have to. That's not one of the only options. One of the other options you can do in melee is shoving someone. And this is actually really, really important if you want to win the contest. You never knock the pro and push it front foot away from you. And then I believe I'm going to double check a couple rules, because this is how DMs work. As they're talking, they're like going over rules in their head, and they want to make sure it all fits. Disadvantage. Okay, so now I gotta look up another rule, because that's how it works. You go from one rule to another, because they all converge on each other in a way that makes it an endless task. Okay, so back to where we were. Shoving. People know about grappling, but shoving is also just as important in combat, because there will be times where, for one reason or another, you want an enemy to be away from you, and you don't really want to run. One of the things you can do is disengage and run away, which is an option. But let's say you're a fighter, because no one's ever a fighter anymore, and it makes me sad because fighters are awesome. Let's say you're a fighter, and you have multiple attacks, but you also want to get to your wizard buddy who's being harangued by goblins, because it's always goblins. It's never not goblins. It's always goblins. So during your combat, you're fighting the big one, like the big burly goblin, and you are 5th level, so you have an extra attack. You swing your sword the first time, you hit it, and then as an action, you can shove something. And what does shoving do? Shoving is the same thing. It's a check versus a check. This time I believe it is a strength check versus, let's see, it's an athletics check against an athletics check, as it normally is. And if you succeed, you can either choose to push the enemy down, so they're laying prone, or you push them 5 feet away. And when you push an enemy 5 feet away and you run away, they can't hit you back, which is very important. If you have the ability to do multiple attacks, being able to shove them away afterward is very useful because it frees up your movement. Because how many times does this happen? Like if you are a barbarian, a fighter, a monk, whatever, you are stuck. You are standing between you and a big guy, and your cleric's kind of in trouble, but you don't want to provoke an opportunity attack because he might stab you to death or whatever. The big orc might stab you, as it always is. So what you do is, if you're a fighter, you take your great sword, you swing once, you hit, you swing another time, you hit, and then as the last part of your action, you shove them away. And when they're 5 feet away from you, you book it to your cleric, and then you just stand next to them. And just simply standing next to an ally is helpful, especially if you're a fighter or a paladin. Like paladins in particular, keep this in mind because paladins can attack more than once, which is very good. And they can also protect people that they are standing next to. What is it called? It is protection. If you have the protection fighting style, then if an enemy attacks an ally that's within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to give that attack disadvantage. So grappling and shoving are tactics that you need to be aware of in combat. And again, take a note of it. Especially if you're a melee fighter. If you are a melee fighter, paladin, fighter, monk, barbarian, rogues have their own way out. Oh, there we go. Keep this in mind. Keep grappling and shoving in mind because it will be very helpful in the long run. All right, number 2 is important in combat, yes, but it's also just important generally. And it's just a rule, not a rule, but something I regularly tell players to keep in mind because it is critically important to do. And that is to work together. Now, I know working together is one of those like lovey-dovey, like, we're all friends here, we're all here to have, like, even beyond that, working together can have real tangible benefits on what you're doing in game. Like not just building camaraderie with the other players, working together can actually do good things that will yield positive results in game, like group checks or helping. Like, let's say hypothetically, the barbarian wants to pull their horse out of the mud. Normally that's an athletics check, and that's the barbarian doing it by himself. But then the cleric hops in and goes, hey, I'm going to go behind the horse and push it so it can have a little help. The DM will be like, cool, that's great, that's good role playing. The barbarian has advantage now on making this check. And I mean, that's great. That's tangible. That's something that you can see positive reactions when you help out other players. And you can also do this in combat. This is the literal action you can do, which is helping. If you're a kind of non-combatant character, you can help your ally, and that ally will have advantage on an attack. Super important. Very good to keep in mind. But yes, work together. Like, not just because it's the right thing to do, because you're in a group game with other people and you want everyone to have fun, and that's important. But work together because it will actively benefit you. It will benefit you, it will benefit your players, and it will make your DM happy. And when your DM's happy, they don't throw things at you that will kill you. Very important. And the last thing about working together is be creative and be detailed. The more details, the more creative you can get, the more likely the DM will be down for it. Will be like, sure, cool, that counts, go for it, roll with advantage. the thing that kind of bothers me a lot in games is when players just say the action that they're doing. I'm going to help them. And that's the end of the sentence. Like, what else? What else are you going to do? Do something. Be clear. Or they're just like, I'm going to barter with the shopkeep. And like, that's it. It's a personal pet peeve of mine, and I know it's a pet peeve of almost every DM in existence, because DMs, we work with what you give us, and if you give us nothing, we can't really do anything about it. So, side note for DMs, don't don't do like negative reinforcement, or like don't negatively reinforce these behaviors instead of chastising someone for like, oh, you're not role playing well enough. Instead, just encourage it when that happens, and slowly it will happen more often. Like if you go, like the thing I usually do is normally toward the end of the game, like when at the end of the session, I'm like, okay, so here's the experience you get, and because you did role playing so well, here's some more. Or if they do like a really good sell, like a really good role play, you can just naturally give them advantage for it. Like, or you just give them inspiration, and that's enough. But yes, work together, because you will see results. You will see very good results if you work together from everyone else on the table. All right, I need to drink because this last one's a big deal. Oh my God, my dog is being so cute. I gotta take a picture of my dog. He's sleeping in a funny position. Look at that little idiot. Look at him. He's so cute. He's so cute. Little idiot. Good baby. Anyway, number 1. And this is something so important that I actually made another video about it a while ago. And this is the most important thing that I think almost everyone misses. Like every game I've run, every time I've interacted with someone, even games I've played and done this, other players will look at me like I've never said, I'm speaking another language. And that is, there are other actions you can do in combat. Yeah. Like you do not have to just hit something with a sword, shoot something with a bow, or cast a spell. There are significantly more options that you can do in combat. And it's so important that you need to know this. Like this is one of those things that you should have written first page of your character sheet, just in a little corner. Write all of these down, because you will absolutely use almost every single one of them. I'm going to try and do like a really quick, truncated version of the video I did, because if you want a more detailed video in a different setting than this, I have a video about what to do in combat. It's important to know. Okay, so actions in combat. So the people that, so most everyone knows that you can do 2 things in combat. You can attack, or you can cast a spell, which is also attacking. Did you know that there are 5 other things? No, there are, sorry. Most people know actions in combat. You can attack, you can cast a spell. Did you know that there are 8 other things that you could technically do in combat as an action? Yeah, it's really important that you know this. And you should write down all 10 things that you can do in combat, because I guarantee you will use every single one of them at some point, and it will make your life easier. It will make the DM happy because you're using it, and the more detailed you are, the more fun everyone has. So let's get into it. The other 8 actions in combat, they're organized in the book alphabetically. If you want to look at them and get them just carved into your arm. They're on page 192 of the player's handbook, and they're super duper important to know. Okay, so attacking. Everyone knows this. You shoot your bow, you swing your hammer, you hit damage. Hooray. Cast a spell. Everyone knows this. You throw your fireballs, you heal people, you polymorph someone into a toad. Everyone knows that. Okay, here are the other ones. You can dash. What's dashing? You can use your action instead of attacking to just run really, really fast. Like if you absolutely need to get somewhere very quickly, you use your action to dash, and you can move up to your movement speed again. So this is super important if you just need to be somewhere. Like if combat hasn't really started yet, or you find out that like it's usually your bard or your rogue gets in trouble somewhere, or your ranger gets in trouble, and you need to run there as fast as possible, use the dash action, and you move your movement speed again. So instead of moving 30 feet a turn, you move 60 feet this turn. Very, very useful. Disengage. To disengage is a super convenient thing to have as an escape tool. Rogues will know what disengage is because they have this kind of built into their class, but everyone can disengage. Every single character can disengage if they have to. Rogues get the benefit of being able to do it as a bonus action, but everyone can do it as an action. Every character can disengage. What does disengage do? When you actively disengage and you run away from an enemy, they cannot attack you as they're running. No one can attack you. So if you are disengaging, just period, and you are, like, let's say there's, like, you're the cleric and your barbarian's in trouble, as they normally are, and there are four gnolls in between you two. You know that the barbarian can probably last one more turn, or you have like healing word as a bonus action, so it's something. So, you're here, the barbarian's here, the gnolls are all around somewhere in the middle. You can use your disengage action to just run straight through the gnolls, not get hit by any of them, get to your barbarian, and just toss them a healing potion, because normally that's like a free action, or even a bonus action, just tossing them a bonus healing potion. So don't sleep on the disengage, because it will save you all the time, especially if you're like a spellcaster or a ranged character. Like wizards should have disengage just carved into their arm at all times, because you would need it all the time. Because if your DM is smart, he's going to send every single enemy at you, because in world, if I saw a group of people and one of them was just in like big flowing robes, long beard, pointy hat, and a staff, if I lived in this D&D world, I'd be like, oh, that's the one that's going to shoot fire at me. I'm going to want to kill that guy really quickly. So keep that in mind. Just a side thing. Like for wizards, like don't dress like a wizard. Just don't dress like a wizard. Dress like a rogue. Dress like a fighter. Just in general, keep it in mind. But use the disengage action too, because you will be ganged up on and you will need to run away. Keep the disengage idea in your pocket. Sorcerers do. Dodging. Dodging is super important as well. Let's say you can't disengage, or you can't really run away. Like you're in a cave or something. Like you're in a cavern, and you're beset on both sides by giant spiders, whatever. You can use the dodge ability to try and weave your way through attacks. And because you're taking an action to dodge, until your next turn, any attack roll made against you has disadvantage as long as you can see it. So let's say you're a monk. Monks do this really well. You are kind of on the front line. You're punching these spiders, and you decide to take the dodge action. Like you just want to hold the fort for a little bit and take the dodge action. Every subsequent attack against you until your next turn has disadvantage. Super, super nifty. Super great. Keep it in mind. It's very important. Which dog is making that noise? Sounds like a puppy. Puppy's been dreaming. Okay, moving on. Helping. I talked about this earlier, but helping is super duper important because I would say spellcasters need to keep the help action in mind because it's very useful. Like warlocks. Warlocks, listen to me. Keep the help action in mind because it will be very helpful. What does helping do? You can lend your aid to another player to boost their ability to do things. So you can do this in and out of combat. Out of combat, you can use it to help an ally perform a task. Like the story I told you before with the barbarian pulling his horse out of the mud. That's technically a help action. And because of that, the barbarian got advantage on the roll. You can also use this in combat. And again, the more detailed and the more creative you are, the more likely that it's going to fly with the DM. So let's say you're a tiefling. You've run out your 3 spell slots for the day, as you always do. And you're like, well, I'm a little screwed. I don't want to use Eldritch Blast right now. So I'm going to help out the ranger. I'm going to and let's say I'm the warlock. I'm going to help the ranger. I'm going to be like, hey, Galthar, look over there. Like there's just a kobold standing there with his pants down. And the DM will be like, sure, that counts as helping. So the ranger will turn and take his bow, and he'll have advantage on the attack. You can give other players advantage on attacks if you use the help action on them. So I would especially keep this in mind if you are a spellcaster, because eventually you're going to run out of spells, and you want to still feel like you're doing things, accomplishing things. And the best way to do that is to help other players. So clerics can help rogues. Sorcerers can help rangers who can help all that. Don't sleep on the help action. It's super useful. Advantage is always good. It's always good to give advantage. What's the matter, puppy? You fell off the bed, you little bean. Silly little bean. Okay. The hide action. The hide action is, again, it's a rogue specialty. And it's special because rogues can do this as a bonus action. But any character can do this as a regular action, which is hiding. And why would you want to hide? Why would a cowardly person want to hide at all? Well, one, it keeps you from being attacked, which is good. It's important. Let's see. It talks about it later in the book, Unseen Attackers. Okay, yeah. So as an action, for rogues is a bonus action, but as an action, you can hide. Let's say you're on a dock, because you're always on a dock, and you're fighting pirates, bandits, whatever. And you are the, we'll say rogue. We'll say rogues because this is what they usually do. Rogues will say, I will hide in a barrel. And you make a stealth check. If the pirates haven't seen you, then you succeed. If they have seen you and they fail their checks, you succeed. Although they'd be a little stupid, but whatever. And you're hidden. And what does it help to be hidden? Well, when you make an attack against an enemy that can't see you, you have advantage on the attack, which is super, super nifty. It's super helpful. Again, all of these other actions in combat will either improve your attacks or help you run away. Just keep those in mind. They'll make attacking better or they'll make running easier. And both are super duper important. So the hide action, anyone can do this. Anyone can take an action to hide and have that same benefit. Rangers, keep this in mind. Rangers, rogues, monks even, if you hide. Barbarians are really funny when they try to hide because if you succeed in some insane way, and you have advantage on swinging like an axe on someone, they're normally dead. So use the hide action. I want to talk about the most important one, but the two that are they're still good, but you don't need to think about them as clearly. They're a little lower level. Is searching and using an object. You can take an action to actively try to find something or someone. That's usually it. And use an object if you are normally doing something small wouldn't even be an action. Sometimes it's the bonus action. But if you want to like push a rock or close a door or hold a door or whatever, that's usually usually an action. So keep that in mind. But the most important one, the ready action. Everyone should do this. Everyone all the time should do this forever. You can create an if-then scenario. And if that scenario happens, then you get to perform an attack, kind of for free. Spellcasters, keep this in mind. Everyone, keep this in mind. Like, you create a triggering event. Like, let's say you get word that someone is going to try and rob your room in an inn. And you're like, okay, well, I'll keep that in mind. And then sometime in the night passes, and then you as the player will go, I'm going to stand at the side of my door with my sword in the air, and if anyone walks through that door, I'm going to stab them. And like the DM would be like, great, cool. And then let's say some sneaky, shady person walks through the door and you stab them and you get that advantage attack because it's great. You can do this with spells. Be mindful when you do it with spells, because if you yeah, so you're effectively like holding your action to use as a reaction, which is very good. It's good if you need to play on kind of the back end, or like you need to play defensively. It's good to have that option of being able to play reactively. Like, you don't have to shoot your bow every turn, because you never know. Rangers especially keep this in mind, because let's say like you see someone cresting over the horizon, and the ranger goes, okay, I'm going to take my bow, I'm going to draw my arrow, and if I see a weapon drawn, I'm going to shoot it. And then, you know, it gets to the dude walking over the hill, comes down, looks like, you know, just some traveler in like a hooded robe with no weapon. All right, cool. You put the arrow down and it's fine. Creating a reactionary play style is helpful when you are kind of uncertain about things. Clerics, healing classes. Sometimes you will, in general, it's kind of better for clerics to be on the lower end of the initiative scale, because then they can pinpoint who's in trouble and help them. But let's say you're a cleric and you rolled a natural 20 on initiative. You have an initiative of 22. You're the first one. You go, I'm going to stand next to the fighter, and I'm going to hold a Cure Wound spell. If the fighter is injured in any way, I'm going to use the Cure Wound spell. And the turn runs its course. The orc takes an axe and then slices the fighter. The cleric goes, sweet, my if-then scenario happened. I'm going to use Cure Wounds, and you Cure Wounds. Keep the ready action in mind, because it is such a good like Swiss Army tool to have, that you want to have it on hand. But in general, all actions in combat are important, and you need to keep them in mind. And all of these are important and should keep them in mind. And eventually, I'm probably going to do a video about what you need to do to streamline your character sheet, because it's very easy to get cluttered. So top 7. Racial bonuses, important. Silvered weapons, important. Ritual spells, extremely important. Tools, very fun. Grappling and shoving, helpful. Working together, essential. Action in combat is more than necessary to know. Write all of these down. Write them on a post-it note and slap it on your character sheet. You will use these all the time now that you know them. I guarantee it. And let me know in the comments or online, on Twitter, on social media, the next time that you use one of these tips. Because I want to know. I want to know when you use this. So keep that in mind and have fun out there. Enjoy your games. Keep rolling. I end it.